Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
I don't know, Jim, the energy out in that room was so good, no one wanted to come back in. But I'm sure after your talk you'll feel differently.
Let's not go there. Let's just leave that.
I'm the student, you are the teacher. This is an opportunity to introduce ourselves to each other. My name is Hubbard.
Bob. Ed. Manuel. Michael.
Jim.
George. Michael. Nicholas. Rob. Lassiter. Marty. Wade. Paul. Will. Kay. Peter. Jim. Snake. Steve. Paul. Buzz. Jane. Harv. Francis. David. Bob. Andrew. Go. Jack. I'm Brooke and I'm visiting from Eugene, Oregon. Peter. Lee.
And all who are here for the first time, if you'd raise your hand, we want to especially welcome you, and I'm glad that you're present with us. It's my privilege to introduce Jim Wilson to you this morning. He's the former Abbot of the Chogye Zen Center in New York. He has studied in the Chogye, the Fuki, and the Soto traditions in Zen. In addition to speaking regularly the first Sunday of each month here at the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, he also leads 2 weekly Sutra Salons here in the Bay Area. Jim.
All right, good morning. Well, thank you for good morning, teachers. Very good. Yes. So, do people have any Dharma questions that have been on their mind that they'd like to ask at this time? The Dharma is clear. Yes.
Is there any area of your spiritual life that Buddhism does not address?
No. Next. No. That wasn't always the case. That's evolved over time. So the truths of the Dharma, spirituality in general is approached by our culture as a separate task. You have you're earning a living and you're going to school and you have your friendships and then you have your spiritual practice. And that's one of the things you do. And it's only for me it was only after practicing for a considerable period of time that I saw how, for example, my meditation practice could apply to my work environment or something like that. It was a gradual process.
As a case in point of that, I'm trying to get a healthier attitude towards my body. And I look at Buddhism and I see things like go to a cemetery and meditate,
yes.
Or you're just a pile of heaps. Are there more redeeming things in the tradition?
Well, you have to understand that what Buddhism is addressing in those contemplations, and so what Buddhism is addressing in, say, cemetery contemplation, contemplation on a rotting corpse, and similar tasks, is impermanence. The difficulty about impermanence, when it is applied to the body, is it's possible to observe impermanence when you break a plate. It's possible to observe impermanence when the sound of a bell ceases. How do you observe impermanence of one's own self? You see, you can infer from your observation of other phenomena that, I also have this fate. I also have this fate. But there's a certain unbelievability about it, for many people. In fact, I would say for a great many people, it doesn't ring true, because, and incidentally, that's one of the limitations of the idea that you have to directly experience everything in order to understand it, like that. So, in a sense, we'll understand it at the moment of our passing, but it's important to understand it before that moment, so that at that moment, one can transit that moment with equanimity, serenity, and peace of heart. So the contemplations on cemetery contemplations, those very traditional contemplations, are designed to make it clear to one's consciousness that this isn't only the fate of others. This is also the impermanence implies to all beings. As the Buddha says, I have not yet escaped impermanence. I have not escaped impermanence. Impermanence will come upon me. All beings are such that impermanence will come upon them. So that's a very, very profound contemplation. So that's its function. And as far as the health of the body is concerned, I'm not exactly sure what precisely what you're getting at, but there are. If you look at human birth as a precious opportunity for realization, that is not available to most sentient beings. It's not available to most animals, it's not available to most deities, for various reasons. And it's not available to most human beings, because they are not born in auspicious circumstances. They are born either too rich or too poor, in an environment which is too conflicted. If you're constantly dodging warring factions around you, there is no time to contemplate. There's no time to develop a foundation for serenity or concentration. All your energy will be focused into that conflictive realm. It's kind of like a demon realm. But if you can look upon this human birth in this body at this time under these conditions, it is extremely auspicious. That I have this opportunity to actually develop wisdom and compassion. I have the leisure to develop wisdom and compassion. That's astonishing. What percentage of people have had that opportunity in their lives? Then one begins to have a relationship to one's body. This vehicle, it may be just 5 heaves, but what an astonishing opportunity! And then then you begin to see it as something that is really worthy and worthwhile maintaining, and optimally. Did you?
Well, I guess this ties right in with that. Just recently, I've been reading John Kabat-Zinn's Focus-Tastic Living, and I've now started doing the program, which begins with a 45-minute daily body scan. And so I wondered if you had anything to say about body scan as a practice.
It's a mode of vipassana. It's an adaptation of vipassana to Kabat-Zinn's work. John Kabat-Zinn works, I don't know whether he still does, but he worked for many years with people who had experiences of chronic illness, chronic pain, and those kinds of difficulties. And he adapted the concentration methodologies of Vipassana meditation to those situations. It's a wonderful application, of that. One of the great benefits, tying in with the contemplation on impermanence is usually as human beings face impermanence, there are various difficulties that arise, pains and sufferings. There's a wonderful discourse of the Buddha when he's quite elderly, like he's 82 or 83, and Ananda asks him how he is, and he goes, Ananda, I am old. It said, my body is like a broken down cart held together with leather straps. And he says the only thing, and then he goes on, this is from the Pali Canon, I'm sorry I don't remember the exact discourse, and then he goes on to say to Ananda, the only time I am free from aches and pains is when I am in meditation. What was refreshing about that is that it shows that he used meditation, in a way that's very similar to what John Kabat-Zinn is referring to. So I think it has, roots in the tradition that are very strong, and it's a valuable practice.
And I guess the other thing that I've been noticing about it was that it seemed to increase my feelings of connection, not just with my body, but with everything.
Well, that makes sense because the body is dependent upon the environment for its sustenance, so it would tune one's relationship to that. One more question, and then I'll...
Why sit up straight?
Why sit up straight?
Yeah.
You mean during meditation, or the slouching posture is conducive to sleepiness. It's just that simple. That's just been observed for many, many centuries. It's a pragmatic rule that. So whether you're sitting on some kind of classic meditation posture on the floor, whether you're doing standing meditation, walking meditation, sitting on a chair, if you allow the back to slump, it's almost inevitable that you will fall asleep. Okay. Yeah. If I have time at the end for more questions, I'll be happy to go into those. But today I'd like to talk a little bit about the fourth noble truth. So the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path. Are people here familiar with the Four Noble Truths? I noticed we had a lot of beginners here, so yes, no, okay. So the Buddha presented his teaching in a very succinct form as Four Noble Truths, and the first noble truth is that suffering exists. People are suffering, sentient beings are suffering. And the second noble truth is that there is a reason, there is a cause for that suffering. And the third noble truth is the truth of cessation. That is, that it is possible to bring about the cessation of suffering. And the fourth noble truth is the path to the cessation of suffering. I like to look at it as the Buddha's map of what he's telling people in the fourth noble truth is that there actually are specific and concrete things that you can do to bring about the lessening or even the complete cessation of suffering. So what I want to talk about is that fourth noble truth today. And it's usually almost always broken down into the 8 components of right view, right thinking, right mindfulness, right speech, right action, right diligence or effort, right concentration, right livelihood, those 8 aspects. So it's a complete program. Covers all aspects. So the Buddha was nothing if not thorough. But I want to talk about the fourth noble truth in a general sense today. Not going into the 8 factors. So the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path, and so the question that arises is the path from what to where? Like where is the Buddha headed? One way of understanding this is by comparing the idea of the path in the Dharma to the path in other activities. So, like, take sports. You might say that the path to becoming an adept in a particular sport has certain components, like right exercise, right diet, right practice, right rules. You have to learn the rules, or the path to musicianship would include right scales, right theory, right rhythm, right harmony, right hand position, or if it's a wind instrument, right breathing. I'm drawing an analogy here, but the path of musicianship is fairly clear, what it is that one wants to accomplish. So you're moving from a position of not being able to play a musical instrument to being able to play a musical instrument. So in sports, you're moving from a position of not knowing how to hold a bat or hold a racket to being able to play tennis, being able to play baseball. So where are we headed when we enter the path of the Dharma? Well, that's answered in the third noble truth first, and the Dharma is the path to the cessation of sorrow. So we're moving from a position where we are chronically anxious, chronically filled with worry, chronically filled with anxiety, dread, and suffering, to a condition where that no longer happens. So that's the first answer, is the third noble truth. Another way of looking at it is we're moving from ignorance to wisdom. So it's the path from ignorance to wisdom. Ignorance about what? Ignorance about what? So ignorance of the deathless and the unborn. So people are chronically ignorant or unaware of the existence of the deathless and the unborn. So the Buddha says in the Udana, there is that which is unborn, uncreated, the deathless. If the unborn and the uncreated and the deathless did not exist, liberation would not be possible. So moving from a state of unawareness of the deathless to awareness makes liberation possible. So there's, from the perspective of the Buddha's teaching, there's an intimate connection between the cessation of suffering and the awakening to the existence of the deathless and the unborn. So that's the path. That's where we're headed. So one of the difficulties about the Dharma is that it's not so difficult to understand why one would enter the path of musicianship. It's not so difficult to understand why someone would enter the path of a particular sport or the path of mathematics, all of those activities. So the question is, why would someone enter the path of the Dharma? And that's why the Buddha frequently would emphasize teachings like impermanence, and teachings that center on the first noble truth, dukkha, that the reason one enters the path of the Dharma is because one begins to become aware of the impermanence of everything in existence, and that there's a sense, a feeling of unsatisfactoriness, in ourselves and our relationship to the world. Once one becomes aware of that, then entering the path of the Dharma makes sense. But that's the reason the Buddha would emphasize those kinds of teachings, because otherwise the impulse to enter the path of the Dharma isn't there. So it's usually the case that most people enter the Dharma because they're the path of the Dharma, or actually any spiritual practice, because they feel an acute sense of dissatisfaction. So maybe Buddhism will help me with that. Maybe. I'll give it a try. So, my teacher used to put it this way: a bad situation is a good situation. So if you are, if you're in this, in other words, if everything is going well in your life, your relationship is zinging along, and your lover loves you, and and you have a good job and all that sort of thing, there's this, not much reason in fact, you might not believe it if somebody told you that existence was fundamentally dissatisfactory. So I remember Sharon Salzberg. She told this wonderful story. Shortly after she moved to Marin, she was teaching at some college in Marin. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, but it was a non-credit course in religion, and she was invited to do sort of the Buddhist segment, and so she got to the First Noble Truth, and there were all these upper-class Marinites, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and she couldn't get past the First Noble Truth because they didn't believe her. Gee, shouldn't the Buddha have gotten a job? Really? Their situation was very good. The situation was very good, and they were young, and they just didn't catch on. And she was really charming. She told about how she said, well, how sometimes you go on a date and you're all excited about it, and then the person turns out to be a loser, and how unsatisfactory that is. They go, oh well, yeah. But so there needs to be some awareness in one's life that this unsatisfactoriness that is appearing in my life is universal. See, that's the key. It isn't that unsatisfactory things are happening to me. The universe is not singling me out, or targeting me for negative things, that's the human condition. So then it makes sense. The path makes sense, and much of what the Buddha teaches makes sense. So another difference between the paths I mentioned, like musicianship or sports, and the path of the Dharma is the subtlety of the goal of the Dharma is difficult to comprehend, But also, if you're talking about the deathless and the unborn, what you're talking about is that which constantly exists. How can there be a path to that which constantly exists? So it seems paradoxical, and but it's not as paradoxical as it seems at first, because even though there is that which is unborn, there is that which is uncreated, there is the deathless, awareness of the deathless and the unborn is not always present. So what is being transformed here is our capacity to awaken to that constantly present nature. So you can play with this with some analogies. Like the earth was always round, but humanity was not always aware that the earth was always round. Not being aware that the earth was always round, the humanity drew certain incorrect conclusions, from that, about humanity's relationship to the planet, to space, that kind of. So that kind of analogy helps to understand, the kind of the nature of the path and why, for example, meditation is important, concentration, expanded awareness, because what is being cultivated here is an ability to be aware and to awaken to that deathless and unborn nature, which leads to the liberation and cessation from suffering. So similarly, the deathless and the unborn are always present, but we're not always aware that it's always present. That lack of awareness is ignorance. Okay? So when the Buddha analyzed what gives rise to suffering, he analyzed what gives rise to suffering into 12 factors, which is called the specific origination of suffering. And the very first factor in that 12-fold chain is ignorance. So that's the top of the list. Ignorance gives rise to suffering. Ignorance of what? Ignorance of the deathless and the unborn. Similarly, our capacity for wisdom is always present. I'm saying the tie-in to the deathless and the unborn is that our capacity for awakening is always present. It's always there in seed form. But we are not always aware of these capacities. We're not always aware that we have the capacity for wisdom and compassion. So, for that reason, the Buddha often taught in similes and analogies so that we could begin to comprehend what it was that he was getting at when he talked about wisdom and compassion. For example, in the Metta Sutta from the Sutta Nipata, the Buddha says that you should treat all beings as if they were your only child. So that's a wonderful analogy, that you can get right into. To say that is the basis for compassion, in the Dharma. So those kinds of analogies make the Dharma less mysterious. When he talks about compassion, what specifically is he talking about? When he talks about wisdom, what specifically is he talking about? So the Buddha is kind of like a teacher or a coach who is confident that we have the capacity to awaken. Even when we're not confident that we have the capacity to awaken. It's once again drawing an analogy to sports or musicianship. If you've ever taken music lessons, the music teacher is almost always confident of one's ability to become a musician. You, as the student, don't know, is this really going to work? You feel like your fingers are all thumbs, and it doesn't sound any better than last week, and this, that, and the other. But the music teacher can see, the development, can see the capacity, can see the gradual blossoming of this ability. Similarly, from the Buddha's view, he can see that all beings have this capacity for wisdom and compassion. All beings have this capacity to bring about the cessation of suffering and dukkha and unsatisfactoriness. But you do have to practice. You do have to, enter the program. And we're not quite so sure. We catch glimpses of it, and that builds confidence. But one of the wonderful things that reading the discourses of the Buddha builds is the clarity with which the Buddha understood this process is really marvelous. Like he really did know what he was talking about. And all those doubts and hesitancies on our own part are addressed somewhere. Like in the discourses, he was very, very clear. And in the history of the Dharma as it has gradually unfolded over the centuries, I have observed four models for the path. I call them gradual, sudden, original, and glacial. So. Those are names. I didn't invent those names. Those are the names used by various traditions. So the reason that there are these different interpretations is going back to that paradox of how can you have a path to that which constantly exists? How does that work? Probably the oldest interpretation of the path is gradual. Jack Kornfield, I think his first book was called A Gradual Awakening. And it's very much Stephen Levine. Okay, excuse me. That the gradual view is that step by step you cultivate meditation, you cultivate right livelihood, you cultivate the precepts step by step down the path, and it's a path of purification. The great manual for this approach is the Visuddhimagga, which means the path of purification by Buddhaghosa. It is the clearest presentation of this view, and it's really marvelously detailed and shows you everything you need to do, and it's really quite amazing when you think of how many centuries ago it was written, how applicable it is to everyone today. So the path of purification is very supportive of Buddhist monasticism. So that part of the ideal here is, at least for a certain period of time, one has to withdraw from society in order to purify one's tendencies. Because when one is constantly surrounded by, bombarded really by visions of greed and lust, hate, delusion, it's hard to, particularly at the beginning, to negotiate that and let go of that. And so the Buddha himself is used as an example of this. He withdrew from his social role. He withdrew from his social obligations and went on a quest which lasted 20 years before re-entering society as a teacher. So that's part of the ancient heritage of the Dharma. We imitate that to a small extent when we go on a retreat, even if it's just a weekend retreat. It mimics that sense of, in order to really see how these thoughts arise, how these attachments arise, in order to really clearly observe, my repetitive tendencies to generate unsatisfactoriness, I need to pull back. And that's based on looking at the path as a gradual, step-by-step approach, that deepens over time. Prominent traditions which use this model, the Theravada tradition as a whole uses this model. The Sakya tradition and the Gelug tradition in Tibetan Buddhism also use this model, the gradual approach to awakening, they refer to it. The second model is sudden, the view here is that which is constant, the deathless and the unborn, can't be approached step by step because it is always here. It's like trying to approach the air you breathe. It's simply something which is always there. And so the model that this tradition uses is that of awakening, waking up to this constant presence. So there is a movement from ignorance to wisdom, but it happens suddenly. The most prominent tradition in the West that has this point of view is Zen, which strongly emphasizes sudden enlightenment. Dzog Chen and Mahamudra are also very strongly rooted in this point of view. Now, all Buddhist traditions recognize the possibility of an individual gaining enlightenment quickly, and I want to emphasize that. For example, in the Theravada tradition, there's a wonderful example that is Kaudinya, who was one of the first 5 disciples that the Buddha spoke to. When the Buddha gave his first sermon, The Turning of the Wheel of the Law, he returned to his 5 friends, and he gave them a lecture on the Four Noble Truths, which is one of the most beautiful discourses in the Buddhist canon. All right. At the end of this discourse, Kaudinya says, "I understand." And the Buddha says, "Kaudinya, what is it that you understand?" All right. And Kaudinya says, "All things which arise cease." All right. And the Buddha says, "Kaudinya understands." Kaudinya understands. Which is interesting because this first sermon, which is called The Turning of the Wheel of the Law, the Buddha's actual sermon is about the Four Noble Truths. It's not about impermanence. So the reason Kaudinya understands is because even though the talk was about the Four Noble Truths, he understood impermanence from that. So that was very quick. That's a very quick awakening. One talk, one Dharma talk, and Kaudinya gets it. It's a wonderful story. And you see these kinds of examples, throughout the Buddha's teaching career, the 40 years of his teaching. Some people responded very quickly. Other disciples not so quickly. The distinctive feature of sudden enlightenment, as presented in the Zen view, is that it's not just that some people can attain enlightenment suddenly. It's that awakening has to occur suddenly. That it can't be done in a gradual way. So that's an extreme interpretation of sudden enlightenment, but you will find it, expressed in some Buddhist traditions in that way. So you cannot approach it. You must wake up. And that's what gives Zen, for example, some of its particular energy and some of its particular shock tactics. As it approaches the students to try and wake them up into the presence of the deathless and the unborn. The third one that I'd like to discuss is called original enlightenment. And it was, and still is, particularly prominent in Japanese Buddhism. It has its roots in the Tiantai tradition in China, but the Chinese didn't carry it very far. In medieval Japanese Buddhism, it really took off. And because Zen Buddhism in Japan, Pure Land Buddhism in Japan, and Nichiren Buddhism in Japan were all founded by ex-Tendai monks, that doctrine started threading its way through all these traditions. And so you'll find it in a lot of different places. But the idea of original enlightenment is that you are awakened, quote, just as you are. So if you ever hear that phrase, just as you are, that's your key for, they're seeing things from the perspective of what is called original enlightenment. The great Western scholar of this particular view is Jacqueline Stone. She traces the origin of it and the politics of it as well, and how it threaded its way through Japanese Buddhism in particular. There's something ironical about this, because it almost seems to completely negate the idea of path. That you are enlightened just as you are. It seems to subvert any idea that you need to, pay attention to the precepts or right livelihood or anything like that. And sometimes in Japanese Buddhism, you really do get that feeling. I'm thinking of Shinran, one of the founders of Pure Land Buddhism, who at times, seems to say that there is nothing to do, there is nothing you can do, it is simply the grace of Amitabha, to awaken to that. That's such an extreme interpretation, though, that it never goes very far. So even people who have that rhetoric, ask you to practice, either chanting the Nembutsu or practicing zazen or whatever it may be. So there's a kind of a discrepancy between the presentation and what people are actually doing. The logic here is that since eternity permeates all of existence, everything must be perfect, just as it is. So I don't know. I don't really trust this point of view, but you'll run into it, which is why I'm bringing it up. It's like it would seem to say, therefore, that people who are malevolent, are Buddhas just as they are, which to me makes no sense. The difficulty I have with it is that it's one thing to say that someone has musician nature. It's another thing to say that they are musicians just as they are. It's one thing to say that all sentient beings have the capacity for wisdom and compassion and awakening. But it's another thing to say that people are wise, compassionate, and awake. So that's my view. I hope I'm not offending anybody here. If you're if there's somebody who's really committed to the original Enlightenment doctrine. The fourth one I want to bring up though is glacial. And that phrase was actually coined by Sangharakshita, who's the founder of this center, of the community that of which the center is a part. And that is the idea that awakening is an eonic process. So there's a discourse, actually it's a set of discourses called the Buddha Vamsa, Chronicle of the Buddhas. And it begins, something 4 million incalculable eons ago. The Buddha, Shakyamuni, was named Sumedha. And during that life, he met another Buddha by the name of Dipamkara. Dipamkara means light bringer, bearer of light. And so he encountered Dipamkara, Sumedha encountered Dipamkara, and arose in him the idea that he wanted to awaken and benefit countless beings through his awakening. And because of that moment, where that thought appeared, over the eons, the 4 million incalculable eons, life after life after life after life, the Buddha continued his practice, so that 2,500 years ago, he was born in India and became Shakyamuni Buddha. This view of enlightenment is very widespread in Buddhist cultures. It's not one that is very widespread in Western Buddhism, but I'd like to offer it to you for your consideration. In the last, say, 4 or 5 years, I have found this view very comforting, personally comforting, in the sense that I know that my practice has given me many benefits, countless benefits, but I also know that I'm not a fully realized Buddha. I know that I have my moments of anger, sometimes long stretches. And I know, like all those things, like one of the interesting consequences of meditation is that you become clear about the arising of these things. And that there's still a part of your presence in the world. There's a certain honesty arises about that. And so the idea of this eonic perspective began to make sense to me. There's a series of discourses from the Connected group where the Buddha says, each discourse begins, this existence has no discernible beginning. Has no discernible beginning. The number of lives you have lived is absolutely incalculable. And then each discourse goes into a metaphor about, to illustrate just how incalculable it is. And this existence has no discernible end. So Sangharakshita talks about this, and how, the enlightenment of the Buddha was like the movement and building of a glacier. It was glacial in its movement over eons and eons and eons of time. If we understand ourselves as embedded in existence in terms of the teaching of dependent origination, this also makes sense. No thought of compassion, no thought of goodwill, no thought of kindness is ever wasted. It's one more snowflake on the glacial movement of awakening and enlightenment for all sentient existence. When I was the chaplain at a hospital for the criminally insane, some of whom were, extremely violent people and could only come to the Buddhist services for if they were accompanied by an armed guard. So. How do you communicate the Dharma to such a population? How do you, you have to really, really lower your expectations. I couldn't give a Dharma talk like this. Sitting still in Zazen, not possible. Very agitated minds, extremely agitated. So ask them to sit still, they experience that agitation. So there's no separation. You see, no ability to sit still and see. So how do you communicate the Dharma to them? I kept relying on a discourse of the Buddha called the Finger Snap Sutra, or Sutta, the Finger Snap Sutta, where the Buddha says to a disciple, if the thought of goodwill for others simply appears in the mind, even for the duration of a finger snap, that person's life is not wasted. The seed of that thought will bear fruit, in time. So I could see that. I could see, like at the end when we would do the Bodhisattva vows, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them all. For that moment, you see, the thought of goodwill appears. And for that moment, there was for the duration of a finger snap, you see, there was a settling of the mind and the heart. That will bear fruit over time. Now, when I say over time, I'm talking eons here. And you need to take a long perspective. The Buddha seemed to have that ability, to take a long perspective. We live in a very, very impatient culture. We live in a very impatient culture. And one of the reasons why I think sudden enlightenment and original enlightenment are appealing to Westerners is that I think it appeals to our, impatience. It's like we want enlightenment the way we want, a burger, our way, now. And there's a sense in our culture that we're entitled to things right away now. And okay, I'll put enlightenment on my MasterCard, but I want it. So One of the salutary effects of looking at the path from what I call the glacial perspective is that there's a certain restfulness about that. It's like if I can take 5 steps forwards, like that is wonderful. That's wonderful. Like if you can do that. Like those people at that prison for the criminally insane, if for one moment they could experience a settled mind, that's wonderful. That's what they could do. And then the world moves on, and the manifestation of that kindness and that caring is not lost. In the interdependence of all existence, that sense of compassion and wisdom radiates out. It never disappears. And ultimately leads to the awakening of all sentient beings. So,
Jim, thank you.
I'm done. You're welcome.
Dharma has been awakened in our midst.
Yes, right.
We're grateful to be here. You'll be available for questions afterwards.
Okay.
Folks. It's an opportunity for announcements.
Today is we'll have a steering committee meeting. The agenda isn't very long, so we could have it at 12:30 so that those who are going to come to the steering committee can schmooze for a half hour. And anyone is invited to the steering committee meeting if you're interested in how the organization works, or if you have any curiosity or any questions. Please come. I'll facilitate it today, and I will pledge to keep it to a half hour. So please come.
We need some volunteers. One of the positions is for host, which is Hubbard will demonstrate that in a few minutes, I think, right?
I guess so.
And also, George needs some help with audio recording. So if people are interested in getting involved a little bit more, see me afterwards. The host is a position that just occurs once every 2 months. You bring some goodies and kind of help the facilitator out. Most people are aware of what the host does. But we need some volunteers.
If you are a beginning or intermediate practitioner, I'm aware that there's going to be a day of mindfulness offered by the Buddhist community that's evolving at the MCC Church in San Francisco. It's going to be this coming Saturday, the 8th of March. And if you're interested in that, talk to me afterwards. I can refer you to the right persons for that opportunity.
Yeah, there's a sign-up sheet out on the table near the Donna Bowl, and any of you newcomers who would like to get on the email list and the mailing list for the newsletter, please give us your info. Thank you.
George.
A reminder that talks are available on the internet at the GBF website, gaybuddhist.org, and also we've just recently migrated to a larger server, so now over 20 talks are available online.
A reminder about the Donna Bowl. This is where we make a contribution to keep this organization going, and we suggest a donation of $5, more if you're able this week, and less if you're not.
Opportunity for fellowship afterwards. There's tea available, and please clean your cups if you choose to have tea. Any other details? If you have any questions about this Sangha, please approach me or others who have spoken, and we'd be glad to inform you about this Sangha. Jim, you'll offer us.
Okay. May all sentient existence be well and happy. May all sentient existence be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May good fortune fill all the days of all the lives of all sentient existence. May all sentient existence dwell forever in the limitless realm of the ever-present peaceful heart and serene mind.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.